Recently, I saved from the landfill and refinished this 4 drawers dresser. To the two of the drawers, I applied this beautiful rosewood veneer. That was my first time of applying the veneer. I just followed the tutorial I found on the internet. It said apply some wood glue to the drawers fronts, let it dry, then put the veneer over and apply some heat with the iron. That was exactly what I did, and I wasn't quite happy with the result. First of all, the edges, they were not glued. In the middle, the adhesion was pretty good, but here and there I had some air pockets. To fix the edges, I just simply reapplied the wood glue, and I was hoping for the best. The rest of the dresser I painted with this beautiful custom mixed navy blue color. I used the microfiber roller to apply the paint, and I didn't like how the top was turning out. So I applied so many coats of the paint and I finally was out of it. On top of it, I applied the top coat and it turned out milky. It was frustrating, so I needed a little break. In 2 days, I got back to the dresser, I mixed a new batch of the paint and I repainted the whole thing. The color was kinda darker than the first one, but it still looked great. I listed it on Facebook Marketplace, and in 2 more days, I found out this. So I decided to peel off this veneer and do something different with those drawers. And while I was doing this, I came up with a different idea. I was told that the right way to apply the veneer using the wood glue is to apply the wood glue to the both surfaces, to the drawer front and to the veneer, which is kind of obvious. The other way is to apply the wood glue to the surface, to the drawer front, and then to apply the veneer without letting it dry, and then to apply the pressure. Since my veneer was peeling off pretty easily and I was able to save most of it, I decided to try those both techniques. So there we go, I put some wood glue on the surface and without letting it dry, I applied my first piece of the veneer. And I applied it the different way, the vertical way, because I didn't have enough veneer. And I spent quite some time trying to spread the glue under veneer to have an even layer, and I tried to push some excess of the glue out. Then I put a piece of plywood on top of it, clamped it, and left it to dry. But for hours, I got back to the veneer, and it was definitely glued, but it wasn't perfect. I'll show you the result as soon as I try the second way. So next, I applied the glue to the veneer and to the drawer fronts, and I left it to dry. And I did notice that I didn't press the record button while I was applying the first piece, but here we go, I applied the second and the third piece the same way. And let's see what we got here. This is the first piece, let's call it wet technique. The edges where the most pressure was applied, it looks awesome. But as you can see, there's bubbles in the middle. And this is not actually bubbles, like not air bubbles, this is the glue. The wood glue kind of bubbled the veneer and it dried that way. So it's not fixable. And here's next 3 pieces. They were applied the same way with glue on the both sides. The first piece was looking pretty good while I was applying. It was like almost perfect, but still I have a little air bubble in there. And the second and the third, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's because of the veneer, but they're bubbly. And here's my conclusion. If you want to apply the veneer using wood glue, the veneer is supposed to be way thicker. My veneer was pretty thin and it acted pretty much like paper. I think the best way to apply this veneer would be using contact cement, but I didn't have enough veneer to try it, so maybe next time. I needed to move on and decide what to do with those 2 drawers. And I had that much glue on them. It was just unbelievable. It was a thick layer of glue. I tried to sand it with 100 grit sandpaper and it didn't really work. I think using some water and try to scrape it would be helpful, but it would be so time consuming. Or maybe I was just making excuses because I already had something in mind. I decided to try one thing I had been wanting to try for a long time. And for that thing, I needed to cut a piece of plywood into 68 strips. To glue the stripes to the drawer front, I mixed some epoxy glue from dollar store. I love this epoxy glue, but the only thing, it hardens in 5 minutes, so I had to work in small sections and I had to mix small batches for that. But you know, it didn't slow me down at all. The whole process for one drawer took me about 18 minutes with all those movements, like clamping one section, working with the other section, then moving those clamps. Once I was done with the first drawer, I had very little of the epoxy glue left. And to get another tube of that glue, I have to drive about 20 kilometers one way, so it always makes me to be more creative. It makes me to go through my stash and find something. This time I found something I would never think about, and that was liquid nails. First, I tested it on the scrap pieces and they were bound together pretty good, so that's a green light. Once I was done with the second drawer, the epoxy on the first one had hardened, and I noticed that some of the strips moved while I was clamping them. To fix that, I was gonna use some epoxy glue, the leftovers, and mix it with the sawdust. I've been using it recently as the wood filler, and I like it. First, I taped the area where I was gonna apply the epoxy, and then I filled up those gaps with my mixture. There were some little cracks in my strips and some gaps in between the strips, so I filled them up with the wood filler. Once everything dried and hardened, I sanded the drawer fronts with 120 and finished with 180 grit sandpaper. I also cut the excess of my last strip on both drawers, and then I sanded the edges and I smoothed them out. I rounded them. To stain my plywood pattern, I used some gel stain in the color Golden Pecan, and I really love how it turned out. This contrast in between plies, that's exactly what I wanted. I left the stain dry over the night, and in the morning I applied 2 coats of wipe and poly. Last step is to attach the hardware, and we are done here. Here is how this dresser looked before. This is the version number 1, and here's the final result. And I know the version number 1 looks a little bit better, but let's pretend we don't like it and this second version is the winner. Anyways, I learned a lot through this makeover and I'm not disappointed at the end. I tried what I wanted to try and I do like how it turned out. And even if I failed the veneer part, oh well, next time I'll do better. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, for your support. I appreciate all your likes and comments, and see you in my next video.